Commencing transmission. Engaging scramblers. Proxy chain initialized. And now, live from his hidden base at the Earth's core, the future ruler of Earth, Doomcock.
Greetings, Dominions and Doomentites. I am Dictor Van Doomcock, the future ruler of Earth, and I am here today to review the first 3 episodes of the Orville, Season 2.
Humph. Took you long enough.
Haste makes waste, Harvey. The Orville is the closest thing we have to Star Trek in these dark times, and one does not review them lightly. No. Doomcock approaches these episodes like a fine wine, sipping and mulling before commenting. Know now that my mulling is complete, and thus do I begin my review. Let us start with the Season 2 premiere of the Orville entitled Jaloja. Now I've taken quite some time to reflect on this episode. God knows Doomcock's love of the Orville has been amply demonstrated in my past reviews, in which I have pronounced the Orville to be the undisputed inheritor of the Star Trek crown now that Star Trek Discovery has assassinated its own franchise, sodomized the corpse, tied strings to its limp limbs, jerked the dead body around on a dark and ugly stage, and called it a TV show. And yet, this review will be proof that Doomcock is always honest, even when it's unpopular, and always relentlessly analyzes even things that he loves. It pains me to say it, but contrary to the majority of other reviews out there, Jaloja is the worst episode of the Orville yet.
Say it ain't so, Doomcock. What, you're going to seriously hate on an episode of the Orville? Is this any way to start the new year?
No, Harvey Cthulhu, I am not going to hate on this show. I am going to critique it with the same relentless logic and plot analysis that I apply to every single show because I love the Orville, and I need this show to be the best it can be. A true friend is one who tells you before you hit the town hoping to get laid that you smell bad, and that shirt you're wearing makes you look like a bartender at some horrible island resort that serves Mai Tais to you in crazy straws, and that the only action you're going to get smelling and looking like that is from Mrs. Roper on Three's Company.
Ouch. Moo-moo and all?
Yes, Harvey, moo-moo and all. I critique the Orville because I want it to be better, and because critical thinking must apply to all shows, or it means nothing. And thus, I begin. In the opening scene, we have Captain Ed Mercer sitting at the bar, listening to As Time Goes By on a vinyl phonograph and drinking bourbon. At this point, Doomcock is ecstatic, as Casablanca is perhaps his favorite film of all time, and Doomcock himself has done similar things when lamenting the loss of what Sam Spade called
the stuff that dreams are made of.
Could not be happier at the spirit of the Orville, and how much Seth MacFarlane gets it, and how much heart there is in this show. There is more sincerity and love for Star Trek in 10 minutes of the Orville than can be found in the entirety of that vile, disgusting piece of trash CBS keeps trying to foist on us as, ha-ha, Star Trek. But that said, despite As Time Goes By, despite the banter with the bartender, which I found amusing, as I do almost all the character moments in this episode, Jaloja shifts from wonderful to alarming almost immediately in this very scene. The bartender tells the captain that he's going to have to order another case of this bourbon because the captain is drinking so much of it. Then Alara comes over to sit next to Ed, and the bartender orders her a triple tequila because, yeah, she's hitting the bottle pretty hard too these days. And there, in front of the bartender and any other member of the crew who happens to be passing by, Ed tells Alara, we're alike because we both feel like we don't belong in our jobs and we're both alcoholics. At which point I buried my helm in my hands and wondered if Kurtzman had ghostwritten this episode. Because this is terrible, people. This completely undermines the credibility of Ed Mercer as a captain and the Orville as a show.
Holy crap! Are you sure you heard all this correctly, Dictor? Is your helm impeding your hearing?
Oh no, Harvey. I heard it. I even rewound this scene and confirmed that Seth MacFarlane himself had written this episode, not Alex Kurtzman. And so I ask you, Is the Orville supposed to be what it was in Season 1? A show that is Star Trek with a wicked sense of humor? Or is the Orville supposed to be a joke and nothing on it should be taken seriously? Consider, can a captain really maintain the respect of his crew and assert command authority when he's openly seen drinking and brooding in the bar all the time? Could he really, in any credible universe, drink with his crew, confess that he feels inadequate to command the Orville to his subordinates, and then confess to being an alcoholic all openly and within earshot of his crew? In what universe could this possibly be? Kirk drank from time to time, yes, but only in the privacy of his cabin and only with Dr. McCoy. I'm certain he would have drank with Spock if Spock were interested, but instead he would confide in Spock over a game of 3D chess, and he would confide in McCoy over drinks. Hell, he never even drank with Scotty, a great and famous lush if ever there was one in the Star Trek universe, because confiding in anyone is a dangerous thing for a captain. In The Enemy Within, Spock articulated the point nicely. When the good and meek Captain Kirk wanted to openly confess to the crew that he had been split into two beings, one good and one evil, Spock very pointedly and with uncharacteristic aggression corrected the captain, countermanding him, reminding him that a captain can never afford the luxury of appearing weak in front of his crew. They lose respect for you, you lose command. Oh, there may not be a mutiny, but a captain leading his crew into life and death situations must maintain respect and authority to have that crew at peak efficiency, willing to go the extra mile for him. Kirk had that authority, despite his moments of doubt, which he shared only with McCoy and sometimes Spock, just as Dr. Boyce served as a sounding board for Captain Pike when he was weary and depressed and doubting himself, just as Picard had that relationship with Dr. Crusher.
I guess when someone gives you prostate exams, you either bond or die.
Yes, Harvey, there's a thing about a finger up the wazoo that puts you in a confiding frame of mind. The thing is, all these great captains understood the need to confide their doubts, fears, and weaknesses to one or at most two confidants and to keep it away from the rest of the crew. So, how are we to consider the Orville credible in this regard? When Captain Mercer is drinking heavily, expressing doubts about his own competence, and labeling himself and a fellow officer under his command as incompetent out loud in public where anyone can hear. Indeed, when the bartender makes a crack and he reacts with horror saying, "Oh God, is the crew talking?" even Ed realizes this would be bad. And yet here he is, continuing to do it. Indeed, at the end of this episode, he's right back there, drinking heavily yet again.
I have to agree, Dictor. I mean, in the first season, we all knew Mercer had doubts, that he only got command because Kelly pulled strings for him at HQ. It's perfectly okay for the audience to know he's drinking hard, that he doubts himself, that he's heartbroken. That humanizes him. That makes him a character we all love because he's not a stiff piece of plankery like Mikey Spock, but a real-life guy.
Yes, indeed. But I can't ignore the very troubling implications of this scene. Indeed, this entire episode. Because if Mercer is capable of this kind of very basic command error, this very fundamental principle of hierarchical leadership, then we're faced with a question that only looms larger as the episode progresses. Is Ed Mercer not merely plagued by self-doubt? Is he actually a lousy captain? And if so, what are the implications for the series moving forward? He does a whole lot of questionable things in this episode, and indeed the script that Mercer's alter ego Seth MacFarlane writes for the season opener of The Orville makes me worry that Seth may perhaps have lost the thread of what makes The Orville great.
Well, before you get to all that, what about the rest of the episode? What did you like about it?
I love the idea of Jaloja itself, this hilarious take on amok time where instead of returning to Vulcan so Spock can mate or die, Mercer must divert to Bortus's home planet so that he can take his once-yearly leak. This was classic brilliant Orville at its finest. The sad part is, this plot twist is merely a set of bookends for this episode. The central thrust of this episode is, who will everyone bring as a date to the peeing ceremony? This is very disappointing because not only is there no danger in this episode, no adventure, no real excitement, no. Essentially, this episode honestly is nothing but a soap opera, where everyone is facing family and romantic problems like As the Galaxy Turns or Guiding Light Speed.
Or dark shoutouts.
A Dune reference. Nice.
Thank you. But isn't that kind of harsh, Dictor? I mean, really, a soap opera?
It gives me no pleasure to say it, Harvey, but I cannot lie. Look at the plot threads. Mercer has a rival for Kelly's affection, and she's bringing him as her date to the pea party. Alara gets set up with the big-headed dorky guy that works with Bortus, which we all instantly know isn't going to work out, and it doesn't. So there's no surprise or genuine interest there. There's no revelation of plot or character. It's simply exactly what we would expect. It's like filler. I mean, if despite his dorky appearance and manner, there had been some kind of genuine bonding there, that might have been interesting. Unexpected. Some shadings that we had not seen coming. But no such thing. We have Gordon crushing on the new woman in stellar cartography, a woman who by the end of the episode it's clear is going to get involved with the captain, thus setting up soap opera-y suspense. Will there be a love triangle conflict down the line? Tune in tomorrow, or about 4 episodes in.
Yeah, that was kind of painful and obvious.
It is. Then we have a nice bit with Isaac once again serving as a kind of stepdad to Dr. Finn's kids when Marcus gets led astray by a lying little shit who screws with the replicators to get vodka. Problem with this story is Isaac is able to provide with logic that it was the bad kid, not Marcus, who screwed with the food replicator to get the vodka. But again, just like Mercer's public drinking and confessional strains credulity aboard a functioning starship, so too does this plotline, because if the security on the Orville is so lax that they can't simply check logs to see what the hell happened, then is this really a credible functioning vessel, or are we, moving forward, going to throw out credulity and just relax in a kind of Mystery Science Theater 3000 kind of way, trusting that the Orville, unlike Star Trek, is just a comedy, so repeat to ourselves it's just a show, we should really just relax? I don't know. I hope not. Because the first season of The Orville was brilliant and I loved it deeply. Because I could not only laugh, I could exult in having a new Star Trek, knowing that MacFarlane loves Star Trek and wants to create something that could function in Roddenberry's universe.
But yeah, I see what you mean. In the best of Star Trek, they combined character development and any soap opera-y relationship stuff within a larger sci-fi context. Even the epic family episode where Picard returns home after his encounter with the Borg were a palpable presence there with Picard on Earth the entire time. Demons that he was fighting, suffering from the horrific violations he suffered at the hands of the Borg collective, doubting himself, a broken man. But comparatively, all this relationship stuff was kind of Love Boat level hijinks.
Yes, Mercer's shuttle drive-by peeking through Kelly's window was funny on one level, and I did laugh, yes. But, taken with Mercer's public drinking, his public confessions of inadequacy and alcoholism, it really starts to make you lose some respect for the man. Not affection, but respect. Something no captain can survive without.
So are you saying the Orville is ruined?
No. Even this episode was fun. Doomcock has genuine affection for all these wonderful characters, and spoiler, the season gets better and better as it continues. This episode was an aberration, a bit of misjudgment on MacFarlane's part, because let's face it, Season 2 is where you may get a whole bunch of new viewers, people who haven't seen this great show before. And seriously, imagine someone new tuning in here and being bored out of their minds, not getting the character stuff, with no adventure whatsoever, and the lead making an ass out of himself over his ex. This is a very, very bad look, and a terrible choice for a season opener. If this had been an episode for the middle of the season, it would perhaps have come off a bit better. Which leads us to the second episode, Primal Urges. Harvey, would you care to give us an overview of this episode?
Certainly, Dictor. In yet another Bortus-centric episode, Bortus is telling Clyden he has to work late, and then he's asking Captain Mercer to leave his post early because he has to get home to Clyden, all because he's hooked on porn on the simulator deck. It just gets worse and worse, Bortus spending more and more time in escalating porno scenarios, until finally he just can't get enough, and he goes to a porn-peddling alien crewman for more extreme porn. And, unfortunately, when he plugs the bootlegged porn into the simulator, it has a computer virus on it that almost destroys the whole ship. I would have to say, this episode also had a lot of soap opera-y elements to it, but I did think it was better than the first episode.
A masterful summary, Harvey. I couldn't have done it better myself. If this episode had only been about Bortus's porn addiction, this episode would have been very much like the first one, and something of a cause for alarm. But fortunately, there were a number of remarkable things about this episode that kept it interesting and elevated it above the premiere. Firstly, the personal drama and comedy were integrated with a compelling storyline, with Bortus's porn addiction actually endangering the entire ship by the end of the show. This plot is conceived in the classic Star Trek tradition, where character development and action are not only balanced, but interlaced. Consider, this episode is a sequel to the first season episode About a Girl, wherein Bortus and Clyden hatch a baby girl, and Clyden insists, against Bortus's will, on putting her through a sex change that is traditional for their all-male culture, turning her into a boy. As this episode begins, Bortus has not been able to forgive Clyden, and this has resulted in Bortus avoiding Clyden and turning to simulator deck porn to fill the void. This is an excellent conceit, because it grounds these characters in reality. Actions in past episodes have consequences that continue to resonate throughout the series, and this really helps to place the Orville firmly straddling the gulf between episodic and extended narrative television shows. If you'll pardon the pun, the Orville really is the best of both worlds, where you can enjoy the continuing evolution of these characters without sacrificing the standalone entertainment value of each episode.
I agree. Although in these first few episodes, I would say that MacFarlane is probably swinging a little too far into a serial soap opera kind of relationship-y show that's soft on science fiction and action.
True. But Primal Urges is a step in the right direction toward balancing the two elements, and as we'll see in a moment, the third episode this season perfects that balance and nails a classic episode.
So, what did you love about this episode, Doomcock?
I both love and hate that Mocklans spell murder
D-I-V-O-R-C-E.
Apparently, in Mocklan society, when you want a divorce, it's okay to stab your mate to death. I hate this because, from a logistical standpoint, I can't really see a civilization incorporating this practice. On the other hand, I love it because it's original, it's surprising, and it seems very consistent with their fun party game that stabs you through the hand with spikes if you lose. Overall, I have to weigh in on the plus side of Mocklan murdervorce, although I question how such a thing could practically function. It also seems that, as captain, Mercer would need to be familiar with the pertinent traditions of all alien crew members that might eventually impact his mission.
In other words, knowing that two married aliens might stab each other to death at any moment is kind of an important safety tip.
Indeed. And what else do I love? The way the Orville throws shade at Star Trek Discovery. So get this, kids. At one point in the story, Bortus's porn addiction has gotten so bad, he needs something even more extreme to get off. So he goes to an alien crew member because he knows this guy can hook him up with primo bootleg porn. And pray, Harvey, what does this alien crew member look like to you?
Well, point my ears and call me Spocky. Isn't that basically the tardigrade from Star Trek Discovery? Not unlike the tardigrade that CBS is being sued for allegedly ripping off from N.S. Abdeen's game Tardigrades?
Give the Eldritch God a cigar. Now, one might say this is a coincidence, except what happens in this story because of this alien makes me believe this is deliberate shade being thrown on STD by a very wry MacFarlane. Consider, this alien, whom I'll call T-grade, gives Bortus some bootleg porn for the simulator. Bortus runs the program, and lo and behold, the program has a virus that infects the entire ship. In essence, the tardigrade gives an STD to the Orville.
Oh, the satire! The delicious irony!
Can't make this stuff up. As a result of this infection, the Orville begins to spiral down into a sun that is engulfing a planet, an obvious metaphor for Star Trek Discovery wrecking the ship that is the Star Trek franchise. STD is indeed an infection. And just as the virus masquerades as entertainment to penetrate the larger systems of the ship to catastrophic effect, so too does STD pretend to be Star Trek, infest the fandom, and kill off more and more fans with every asinine episode.
Oh, the humanity!
Good callback to the Hindenburg, Harvey. Yet another tragedy that will never be forgotten. So MacFarlane takes a shot not only at STD's metaphoric torpedoing of the Star Trek franchise, but also raises the specter of the Anis Abdeen lawsuit pending against CBS. Perhaps this is revenge for CBS trying, however impotently to hilarious non-effect, to steal the Orville's audience by releasing new STD episodes 30 minutes before the Orville airs.
I don't think that really did all that much.
Neither do I. But still, MacFarlane notes it and responds to devastating satirical effect. Note to companies, don't piss off witty people. Humor is nothing to play around with. It is also perhaps a shot across the Star Trek Discovery bow that it takes Isaac to cure the computer virus at the end. Which leads me to wonder, since Isaac is almost identical to Data on this show, is MacFarlane making the point that only a return to classic Star Trek can cure the Star Trek franchise of its STD affliction? Food for thought, that.
Very interesting, Dictor. A classic Trek element purges the mutant strain from the franchise. I mean the ship. I like the sound of that. A fascinating metaphorical examination, sir. So, anything else you liked or disliked?
I loved the visual effects when Bortus and Isaac, the only two crew members who could survive the radiation of the star that is devouring the planet, take a shuttle down to the planet to save a small group of survivors who have taken refuge in an underground base at the center of their world.
They have their own Xanadu, do they?
There is only one Xanadu. But that said, a major flaw with this episode is for dramatic purposes, they show the star way too close to the planet in this episode. Boiling off the oceans, the heat and radiation, even at the center of the planet, would be unbearable. There would be, in my opinion, no survivors by the time Bortus and Isaac got down to the planet. But this is mere quibbling. The shots of the shuttle landing on the surface and Bortus and Isaac walking to their destination with the sun raging above them is fantastic. Overall, I'd say this is an average episode of the Orville and a step above the season premiere.
And what about the third episode, called Home?
Home was perfect in every way. A heartfelt episode that perfectly integrated drama, comedy, and action in the very best tradition of the Orville. I experienced something watching this episode that I rarely experience.
Sobriety?
Joy. I felt joy. I felt like I was watching an alternate universe version of Star Trek, and for a geek who has watched his beloved Star Trek be poisoned by this toxic pseudo-Trek abomination for over a year, this was a breath of clean, pure Star Trek, and a reminder of why we fight and why we care. For moments like home.
In this one, if I recall correctly, Alara Kitan's strength is waning. This is because she left Zelaya to serve the Union at too young an age, and living in the weakened gravitational fields is making her physically deteriorate. If she remains on the Orville, she will lose her strength entirely and become like the rest of the crew. Average.
And that's one thing Alara has never wanted to be. Average. But on her home planet, that's how she was always viewed by everyone, especially her family. Average, somewhat pitiable Alara, who could measure up to neither the standards of her demanding and successful father or the achievements of her sister. Faced with the choice of permanently losing her strength, Alara opts to return home to recuperate, hopefully arresting the progress of the disease, regaining her health, and returning to her position aboard the Orville at a future date.
I think maybe you shouldn't go plot point by plot point on this one, Dictor, because this is one episode that should never be spoiled.
I agree. I'll try to simply limit my critique to a few salient general points, because it may well be the best episode of the Orville yet, and it deserves a fresh viewing by everyone. All right. The drama that ensues between Alara and her family, particularly her father, played once again by Robert Picardo, the hologram doctor from Voyager, is nuanced and, for those of us who have also experienced family issues in our own lives, maddening. Like Sarek in Star Trek, Alara's father was horrified when Alara joined the military, viewing the Union as a bunch of knuckle-dragging meatheads, and their conflict is both engaging and convincing.
Excellent performances all the way around. And Alara's planet, Zelaya, man, oh man, what a beautiful place.
Yes, the effects on Alara's homeworld are just drop-dead gorgeous. They even have her riding an animal that I found quite engaging and convincing as well, which is rare. I am usually underwhelmed by such things, especially when done on TV budgets, but in every way, this episode succeeds brilliantly. I will say there's a development later in the show that I genuinely did not see coming, and the action-packed finale of this episode really blew me away.
Yes, the stuff with Mercer and the gravity field.
Shh. We agreed. No spoilers for this one.
Okay.
I will say this, however. It was amazingly cool to see two Star Trek doctors side by side in the episode. Voyager's holographic doctor played by Picardo and Enterprise's doctor played by John Billingsley. Yet another hidden message, Harvey. Another encoded bit of semiotics, informing CBS that the Orville is the future of Star Trek because it so aptly pays tribute to Star Trek's past, incorporating as it does the earliest of doctors in Enterprise and the most far-flung futuristic doctor, a hologram on Voyager.
Damn. Truly, thou art the future ruler of Earth.
Told ya. All in all, this was a powerful, perfectly executed episode with an ending that will move fans of the Orville and Star Trek alike, an emotional ending with permanent consequences.
Yes, I noticed at several points during this episode, especially at the ending, that I heard what sounded like echoey sniffles coming from inside your helmet, Doomcock.
Allergies. Just allergies. Damn cedar. This season got off to a rocky start, Harvey. But 3 episodes in, I can safely say that the ship has righted itself, and I predict smooth sailing ahead for the Orville. From the center of the Earth, this is Dicta Van Doomcock, the future ruler of Earth, bidding you all, my friends, stay angry and watch the Orville.